Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, and here with another team and Supercoach discussion. Lucky last, but it's nothing to do with the fact that they are 3 hours away from us, eastern borders, but we do love them, the West Coast Eagles, and we've got a very special guest from the Plus Six podcast. Jeppa, welcome, mate.
Thanks, Swizz. Thanks for having me, mate.
No, mate, I couldn't think of anyone else for the West Coast Eagles, so it'd be good to get in. I know, obviously, you are more of an AFDT man, but I think when it comes to actually discussing the players, it all cross over. And a bit like my boys, the good thing about us struggling is there is a lot of players to talk about from the West Coast Eagles. So I'm sure we'll go into them in depth in a moment.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, new coach at West Coast, so that does change up a lot. You'll definitely see a Richmond style of play that you're used to watching, mate. So that was evident. And yeah, some new players from your mob as well, which will lead the way.
Yeah, it's one of those things in footy. It's like, do you really have a second team and stuff? I've bought the Tassie jumper because I'm like all in. It's great for the Tasmanians to get their side. But it's going to be hard not to watch West Coast with a real soft spot this season with McGovern coming in, which I think a few Richmond supporters are a little disappointed he probably didn't become our coach because there is a lot of love there, and I think he's going to be great for the Eagles. And then, having Jack Graham and Liam Baker, who are premiership players from the Tigers. Graham, I was going to say going back home, but he was a South Australian boy, but heading over there, joining Bakes, who is a Western Australia boy. So it'll be interesting to see how they fit in and go. There's some still great senior players on that West Coast list, and there's some really exciting rookies. So I think it's going to be an exciting time still for the West Coast supporters to watch these guys and then just see how these senior players fit in under McGovern's new game style.
Yeah, for sure. But I think we're going to do a lot better than many have us finishing, I suppose, or whether you measure it by number of wins. But I do like what I saw on Friday. It was a close session. Had a couple of contacts at the Eagles that got me through there and, learned a lot. So very settled lineup, very run and gun. That, again, we've gone from Adam Simpson's slow build-up style of play, chip mark sort of game plan like St Kilda played to a run and gun style and chaos footy. So Mini is definitely a wise head. All the messaging out of the club has been just straight shooter, doesn't mix his words, really puts the faith and backs in the young fellas or whoever, is basically in the A team now. It's refreshing as a supporter and as a fantasy and Supercoach fan, it's going to be interesting.
The start of the season is probably not as good as what you'd probably expect for a team that obviously did finish in that bottom four. Suns at home, that's one that even though the Suns are improving, you could get a win early, but then having to travel to Brisbane, the local derby, and then Giants again on the road before Carlton over in Adelaide in that gather round. You're probably a little bit hard done by for that sort of 4 of those 5 games.
Oh, look, travel from Western Australia is hard at any time. I know we do have a couple of back-to-backs, and now that North Melbourne are playing the extra home game here, it does help immensely as well. So, get it out early in the season, which I think's the preference from both Fremantle and West Coast, is to do some travel early, and then as the season wears on a bit and there's a bit of wear and tear in bodies, they can do less travel. So, Gold Coast here. That's to help Gold Coast as well. And then, big trip to Brisbane, which will be obviously against the reigning premiers, a pretty hard matchup. And then, Derby here, Freo, which will be a West Coast home game first, I think. And then, GWS is not a small trip either. So, look, it is what it is. They do have a hard run to go to start with, but that's not to say we don't start with a lot of their players in our first teams.
Yeah, I've always been big on this, and I don't know how you feel, obviously, from somebody being in Perth. not just the Eagles and the Dockers, but also like the Scorchers too, playing back-to-back road trips when it comes to the Queensland and Sydney teams. Like starting off, say, the Gold Coast. Let's just say you didn't play Gold Coast round 1, but it'll say Brisbane round 2 and then Gold Coast round 3 in a back-to-back trip. Do you think that would be actually better suited? I know there's always some part-time staff at the club, but that would probably, in my mind, reduce some of that travel that obviously, instead of the 11 or 12 trips throughout a season.
It would definitely suit us more now because there's less dads in the team, but we're an much older team, a lot of families at home. I don't think that's fair on those types of arrangements personally with a young family as well. So I think that's the reason why the Players Association would definitely have a vote in saying that. But yeah, it would be a great idea if I'd say Pikey and the leaders of the club would want it, but the players would definitely push back on it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's always the hard one because it's you rob Peter to pay Paul kind of situation. But maybe if it's just one of the things when it comes, especially Queensland, I think if you could get a situation where maybe you played the Sunday and then played the Saturday, so it's only sort of 6 days away.
Yeah.
Players do go off on 3-4 day camps anyway. So, yes, it's definitely hard for the families, and we do understand that side of things, especially not just from the players, but the staff in particular. The players probably get around with it a little bit easier. The experienced guys, probably do have the financial resources to potentially get help if need be with the families. But always trying to think about the other staff members. But at the same time, is it harder to sit there and then have to get on a 4 or 5 hour plane trip, twice a year over to Queensland? And mate, that's just my food for thought. But no, I like the fact that you did bring up those reasons.
Yeah, look, let's see what happens in the future. It's an evolving beast, the AFL, and definitely a lot of changes recently with approaches to suspensions and players associations. So never rule it out, mate.
Yeah. And the double games, at least there's a couple there where you'd be pretty happy with: Melbourne, Richmond, even the Crows, potentially the one at home, depending on how they're tracking later in the year. You did talk about sort of expectations improving. What would you think? What are your kind of expectations? It might not obviously be wins, but what are you thinking on the season, mate?
Yeah, for me, it's staying in games longer. I think that's a way better indicator than wins. Being around football clubs as a young fella, and even in my early 20s, that's what it was always spoken about. It was never about wins and losses. It was about getting in positions to win games of footy. And that may sound cliche to many, but that's just the reality of it. So the style of play that Mini wants to play definitely allows that. When you're playing a slow chip mark game, when it gets turned over, it's normally to the one-on-one numbers, and it's easier to score that way. So I just feel like the style of play suits that better. The draw and the double games for us, obviously having the bottom 6 fixture is easier. But yeah, just staying in it for longer. If I were to put a number, 7-8 wins would be nice, but I think, getting rid of these 100-game or 100-point blowouts, which they still will happen this year. There's no doubt about it here and there. But, expecting big things from Baker and Graham in terms of leadership, not just performances on field. They're there really to show how gut running is done. That's another thing West Coast have lacked so badly over the last few years. I won't name names, but there are certain star midfielders in our team that just do not run both ways. So, it can be quite frustrating.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we'll get into that best 23 at the moment. So I've got Marriage going down the back line. He is listed as a forward in Supercoach, so, and I think fantasy as well. So somebody who actually is a little bit of interest now. Edwards, Howe, Jinby, McGovern, who was absolutely brilliant last year. Liam Baker slotting at halfback, could slot really anywhere. Hutchinson on the wing and Duggan in the midfield due to Elliot Yeo's injury. Sort of still a timeline hasn't been put up when he's going to return from that knee injury. Hunt, and then Graham, Allen, Owies, who's come across from the Blues, Liam, Ryan, Waterman, and Cripps. I've got Flynn in the ruck for now, but that's still obviously being debated. Harley Reid and Kelly, Cole, Brockman, Hewitt, and Williams, the other ruck, and then Bo Allen, the new recruit, as the sub. What are you thinking about that, mate?
Yeah, so big shift changes or positional changes is Marek, and watching him in the flesh, he did have a few kick-ins, which was good. He's going to try slice through the zone with his kick, but he will turn it over here and there. But that's okay. That's all part of his learning and development, but that's his job. So watching them and them being Jimby and Marek, they sort of were intercepting, and then one would run and gut run through and try break through the zone with their running carry, and then one would stay back. So Jimby I like, Marek I like a lot in those positions. Marek really impressed me on Friday. So Hoff is Hoff. He's so reliable, and then we'll see the mix of Baker, but obviously he's going to do everything in his power to stop the opposition. So defensively, I think we're set up pretty well. The wings was interesting. So Hutchison was on one wing on Friday, and then again not having a full squad for the A team, but they had the other half forward or one half forward on the other wing at all times. And being a Richmond man, I remember seeing some of the young fellas do that for Richmond as well. Maybe not last year, but the season before. I forget his name, the speedy paced half forward that you've got. He's quite a young fella. You've got actually quite a few of them.
Yeah, we've got a couple in there. Like we've got obviously Rioli Junior, Steely Greens come in. They do play that kind of swap and mix and match.
So it was quite interesting to have that setup, I suppose. So Hunt did start on the bench, but then he came onto a wing as well. So yeah, it's all about covering and gut running. So do you cover your mates in the D50, or do you push forward and outnumber the contest? So that was good, interesting to see. So Hutchison's another cheap player to take a lot of. He did get a few CBAs as well, mate. So they're definitely going to back him in this early part of the season, or late part of preseason. Definitely, it's his opportunity to take. But he's definitely got the tank. He's got the size too to help out in defence and take an overhead grab. He did that a couple of times. And then, Duggan in the middle now. So that's the move. He's obviously going to be a bit of a physical presence and help Harley around the contest and feed it out to him. So another positional move, Marek back, Duggan in the middle. I like Graham at half forward a lot. It wouldn't surprise me if Baker did move to a half forward later in the season, just again because of that two-way running, and half forward is the hardest position for two-way running. So they're the fittest blokes. Graham for sure. Like, talk about a physical specimen. He is unbelievable. And then, forward line's pretty much the same. So Liam Ryan looks fit, hungry. Definitely looked at yesterday. Waterman missed a session on Friday. Sorry. And Cripps was probably best on, just being involved with everything. And I think the game style suits Jamie Cripps to a T, even though he's in his latter years. So, midfield is interesting, right? So we've got Harley, Kelly, Duggan, and then probably Elijah Hewitt. And Elijah Hewitt was excellent, again, in that session. Very much must be a part of every Supercoach team and fantasy team. Just power, speed. I think he's more suited to Supercoach because he's not that big accumulator, and everything he does touch turns to gold, right? So he's of the Dusty type, the Layla type, even the Harley type. He can play half forward, kick goals, or he can go on ball and be a presence. So, a lot riding with Hewitt this year, and he's hungry. Like, the poor fella has been injured for the whole of his career to date. And he's hungry for success. You can see it. And every session he's been approaching is been at 100%. So really pleased to see that. And then, there's some guys making up the bench numbers. Definitely better depth at West Coast, which is good to see. Young Tommy Gross was, along with Cripps, was best on for the B team. So, and I'd have Gross actually best on for the whole field, just because he played inside mid for the B team and probably had the role to accumulate better. And just courageous fella. Really excited to see a pick 46 come and have such an impact. So maybe write it down, Swizz, for later during the season for a Tommy Gross debut and trade him.
Mate, I think it was in my first Supercoach team that I put out to the public. I think I had Gross in. So I'd heard the big raps on him, and what you've said and the other reports I've heard, nothing sort of discouraged me that thinks that he could be part of this squad sooner rather than later.
There was one contest, mate, where he was running full pelt, did not deviate. Bo Allen got him high, and he gave Bo Allen a big shove in the chest and went back 45-degree angle, 45 metres out, and slotted it. So he's a good customer. I like the angriness about him, that fire in the belly type player. Takes no prisoners. We need that, definitely. And he'll be playing games in 2025 for sure.
Yeah, no, and I think he'll love working with Liam Baker in there, mate. I think they've probably cut from a bit of the same cloth there.
Yeah.
We'll get into some of these targets. We'll start off with the main man, the absolute rock star over there, mate. Give us a little bit of an idea for us Eastern Siders what sort of presence Harley Reid has in that city.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel sorry for the kid, number one, because it's so much for him, and I think it's actually deterred him in a way where he's a bit sick of it. But yeah, there's no lie. He not this year so much, but he's been on the back page, and obviously the West is trying to make money and sell papers, and like my young fella's 10 years old, and all of him and his teammates they all want to fend off. So you can't fend off in under 11s. And the amount of free kicks we gave away because they all want to be like Harley Reid, right? So it stems from the young kids and then it filters up and even to the adults. But watching him play, it's just sensational, right? So something always happens when he has the ball in hands. He's copped a bit of attention in the second half of last year because of how good he is inside and tight. And he loves the physical aspect of the game. I think Petrarca said in an interview last year where he kicked that, I think it was goal of the year in the end, he ran towards him, which is hilarious because you don't expect it and you're like, you're sort of confused. So, yeah, look, I don't think he's had the best preseason to date, I'll be honest there. And Supercoach-wise, like mid-only, it might change a few things, but obviously he's still the number one mid at West Coast now. He's overtaken Kelly, and he has to be. Victorians need to understand, and Eastern Staters, that West Coast are putting pieces around Harley for Harley to excel. So with North Melbourne, they've got LDU, Shees, McKercher. There's a lot of A-listers there, and they can't all be A-grade players in a game. Where you bring in Graham, you bring in Baker, you have players around Harley that can support him to be his best. So he can be the number one undisputed player in our team. And I think people lose sight of that. So there was a lot of up in arms about trading pick 3 and getting rid of Finn O'Sullivan, or end up being Jacob Smith in the end. And yeah, I was one that was a bit shocked by the trade, but then it all worked out in the end. And you can understand what West Coast are doing. Gavin Bell, who's our head of football, it's not his first rodeo. So Harley Reid is set up for success, and Supercoach wise, they can only have upside. So another preseason, like I said, probably hasn't had the best preseason. He came off in that intra-club on Friday, wasn't injured, just pulled up a bit sore and didn't want to push it. But yeah, let's see what this kid can do, because again, he's playing for a contract as well, right? So big payday, and he probably wants to add a couple of zeros, so to speak, on his next contract.
Yeah, I think you could just give him a blank check. I'm one of I feel like few Eastern Borders who are like, nah, man, he's going nowhere. He's staying there. He's long-term committed to West Coast. And I think, just his attitude in games last year, it just shows that. And even so, like I get Essendon supporters all the time saying, "Nah, we weren't getting him." And my response to that is like, "Are you selling half your club to bring this guy in? Because West Coast aren't letting him go for anything less, and because he's just going to be a superstar for years to come. It's probably as exciting as you've probably got since the Judd days to have somebody who's just walked into the club with that sort of impact." And it probably, unfortunately, summed up my Supercoach season last year because I did trade him out before the Sydney game because he was playing forward. And I was like, oh, here's a guy who's probably going to score 50s. And then that next month was just unbelievable. So you're right. They're putting the pieces around him to give him the best chance to succeed. I don't know at 434 if I'd be wanting to pay it this year. He's got a lot of fans, but I would temper my expectations on the kid this year. But it won't be long until he'll be one of those guys that just start the season, Supercoach and Fantasy Open, and it's like, okay, we're picking Nick Dacos, we're picking Cheezer, we're picking Harley Reid, and just lock those three in as our starting midfielders because they're going to be running the competition.
Yeah, exactly right. So, yeah, watching closely, but yeah, I just make the point that there's pieces around Harley for Harley to succeed, and that way that gives weight to picking him in Supercoach.
Matt Flynn is a very well, I think he's probably taken up most of the content creators' time of discussing how he fits in. Obviously, West Coast going with Williams last year. Now that obviously Natanui's not around, they've brought Flynn in from GWS. There's a lot of discussions on, will he be first ruck? Do they still, all the time they put into Williams last year, will he be the man? Will they flip between the two? Where are you sort of seeing that debate at the moment?
Well, in the intra-club, they kept flipping each quarter. So Flynn started in the A team and then B team, he was in the reserves. In the second quarter, he was in the B team. And then third quarter, he was back with the A's. And then last quarter, he's back with the B. So they're keeping everyone guessing, probably including themselves, right? So I would lean towards Flynn being the number one ruck for sure, because I think Mini wants that physical, tap-dominant ruckman. Bailey Williams he competes fantastically well. No one can question that. But his tap work is behind the eight ball compared to other number one rucks. So I'll be leaning to Flynn, but it comes with risk, right? You've got to be able to pivot off Flinny if it does turn sour, and at R2, that's the hardest way to do it, right? I know the flex position does change strategy this year for Supercoach, which is great. And maybe that could be for a Flynn or a Tom DeConning, or I don't know how one would set up. But yeah, if you're starting at Flynn at R2, okay, just have a backup plan because it could turn very quickly.
Yeah, I think in previous years there's been nowhere to go if you had, say, a Flynn there at R2, but at least with the flex, I think that's where most people are looking at putting him. You put him there, and if it does go sour, well, you've got all lines that you can swap him to. Much easier to do. Even in this West Coast team, there's some forwards we're about to talk about who are cheaper than him, that if they've started strong and Flynn's not out of the side by round 3 or 4, it's an easy pivot where, under the old strategy, I think the ownership would be a lot less.
Yeah, no, agreed. That sounds like a sound strategy to me. With ruckman, and especially number one ruckman, like Flinny's a physical ruck as well. So yeah, there's definitely advantages and things to be gained in Supercoach having him there.
All right, down to that forward line. So we'll leave my two boys for starters. We'll go, and I haven't put Marriage in there, but let's talk Hutchinson and Marriage because they're around the same price. We've got one who's come in and now playing, as you've said, is playing wing, and the other one's coming into the back line, and with that positional change. And that's sort of more expensive than sort of our premium rookie. Do you think they could put enough on that sort of value to make them worthwhile starting picks?
Yeah, both of them. Both Marek and Hutch, for sure. So both of them, like Hutch's kicking is not the greatest. I think he knows that, and that's something he needs to work on. But Marek will almost be a designated kicker in some instances. So what I did notice was whoever was closest to the goal line took the kick-ins. There wasn't that many to sort of get good data from. But Marek definitely seemed like one that was slicing through the zone with his kicking, and he is a better than average kick. So Jimby, not so great, like as courageous as Bakes is, he's probably not the greatest kick in the world either. Gov can definitely hit a target when he needs to, and Hoffy is really pretty good, 40 metres and below. So, but Marek I definitely rate, and look, it was only seeing him in the flesh Swizz on Friday that changed my view on that. So he's a target for me in the fantasy game too. But for Supercoach, at like a pretty cheap price, it's pretty handy to have. Hutch, like I said, it just seems like the opportunity's been given to him, and it's up to him to take it. So he ticks all the boxes with fitness, courage, gut running and all of that. And I think that's why he's gotten the first chance to succeed. But the kicking is an issue. So 2 turnovers stood out on Friday in my head. But the advantage of Hutch was he did go inside for a couple of CBAs. Wasn't a huge percentage, probably 15%, but at least he's in the combo for it. So, yeah, again, if I was going to have a choice between the two, I'd have Marek ahead of Hutch, but they're both pretty similar.
Yeah. I think you sold us on Elijah Hewitt before. I think there's not much more to say about. Just have that kid in. Doesn't matter if it's your forward or mid. Yeah, he's probably an easy one to either have at your F7 or your M9 in both positions and that. And especially because of the sort of round 2, 3, 4, and especially in Supercoach where we are playing best 18. You can loophole him with another player. West Coast do have a lot of those Sunday games to start off with, so you can potentially have him on ground, start Kako or Berry or whoever else you've got in that forward line. If they go well, then you just bench Hewitt. If they don't, then keep Hewitt on field and have him as the rookie that week.
Yeah, 100%. He's physically ready. It's just if his body holds up, right? So. And like I mentioned before, I think the biggest thing with him and knowing him from afar, I suppose, or the outside looking in, he's so hungry to succeed or do well. And, he's a proud person, I suppose, in unison with that. So, yeah, expecting big things from him this year if his body holds up, mate. He's just it's almost a no-brainer.
Talking about bodies holding up, I don't have this guy listed anyway, but he had an absolute brilliant year last season. Jeremy McGovern, mate, can he do it again?
Yeah, I think he can. We've had new fitness staff at West Coast. I think we pinched one of your blokes in Richmond. I saw the other day we've nabbed a Collingwood recruiter too. So we're getting them all of the off-field staff from the Eastern States over, and
the West Coast Tigers, mate. The way it's turning out to be,
we'll take that. But yeah, McGovern obviously was a beneficiary to that. Going to Dubai, I think he went to Dubai with Harry Edwards last year for the week, much like Sean Darcy is now. And yeah, he looks trimmer. He was carrying a lot of weight 2-3 years ago, which probably didn't help him injury-wise. But, yeah, I think he can do it again. Word on the street is he wants one, like he's out of contract this year. He wants one more year, which I think takes him to 34 years old. I think he's 33 this year off the top of my head. So that will be interesting. So, yeah, he's playing for probably another, $600,000 for next year. And with that will come some success. But we just need him, mate. We just need him to be him, to be the interceptor, to be everything, the leader. Because, we've got Harry Edwards, there's young Bazo who's coming through injury. We're probably going to list either Van Esk or Brock as a SSP. And Callum Jamieson's still raw. They're playing Harry Barnett, Batman, as a bit of a defender, as a bit of cover. So there's risk or plans, what's the word? Just in case Gov goes down, there's there's plans in place to cover him, but we need him more than ever. So I imagine he was pretty high up there in Supercoach last year because he took majority kick-ins, was one of the leading interceptors for the whole league, ended up being All-Australian. I think he can do it again, just the way he looks. And watching him on Friday, he looks very trim and ready, very ready.
Yeah, his first half of the season in particular was just out of this world. And even if you still managed to keep him through a couple of the games where he didn't play late, and you were still putting out massive tons. So, he's the lead of that backline. I know you say you're trying to work around replacements for him, but it's so hard to replace guys like that. So you need him fit and firing, and if he's there, he's helping out and bringing in some of those younger guys that you've put around him. So, important piece, and hopefully he gets as much of the season in as possible because, he deserves another year at a big money, and and we wish him all the best there. I'll leave my last two boys, my former two boys to last year, Liam Baker and Jack Graham. So what have you seen so far from them? And I'll add a bit to that after you've done, mate.
Yeah, look, just firstly off field. So there was an introduction function at West Coast where they introduced all the new recruits and the draftees, and Bakes and Graham were very much the cornerstone of that. Baker spoke about being a leader for the young fellas and helping Mini implement the game plan as fast as possible to the other West Coast lads, and same with Graham. So leadership is first and foremost for both those players. Both of them do it naturally, and that's great. I think Graham's impact is going to be understated a bit more than Baker's. I think Baker, we know, is going to throw his body in and win those 50-50 contests, but Graham's running, physical support for the mids, namely Harley, is going to be pretty important. How that equates in a Supercoach sense is, Baker's going to have that halfback position where he's going to get enough of the ball to get his scores up, win the contested possessions, and win the 1%ers too. So, expecting big things from both. It's not going to be linear, I don't think, for both of them. Hopefully, Graham can keep fit and healthy because he's had his injury woes. First impressions, elite leaders and professionals on and off the field. So that's what we need for sure. And that's what the list management team at West Coast prioritised, I think. So we always had that gap. Like we had a big list clean out in the last 2-3 years, especially in 2024. No Rotham, no Witherden, a couple of not even close to fringe players being delisted. So, the list is far more competitive now, and adding those two leaders to lead the younger brigade into the next era is definitely not a fluke. It's been thought of. So, Duggan's got some support in leadership, same with McGovern and Oscar. So it'll be nice to have your boys there. Like I said, Supercoach-wise, I don't think it will be linear. If I was going to pick one, I'd pick Graham, just because I'm more of a tight ass and play a bit more value. I like playing the value game, and I know Supercoach is slightly different, but we still play the value game. So Graham is going to have a big year. I think his responsibility is going to be more at Richmond, just where we are at in terms of the lists, and Mini will rely on him because he knows what he's going to get out of him, right?
Yeah, 100%, mate. So I get where North Melbourne bringing in, say, Jack Darling, who's about to play his 300th game, and Luke Parker, for where their list is, it's probably a couple of years further down the road, where probably the guys who are in their 30s make a lot more sense compared to Graham and Baker, who are 26 and 27. You need a little bit more time with these guys to grow the game plan. And I think by the time when West Coast are really challenging again, they're going to be still around which is good, but they are going to be on the twilight of their career by then.
Right.
But what they obviously will add around that group, Liam Baker was a fan favorite of us at Tigerland because he's not the guy that's going to come in and change games by getting 30 touches and stuff like that. But it's the 1%ers and because obviously a lot of supporters watch their own team, West Coast supporters will fall in love with this guy because you'll watch him do 1%ers off the ball that no player does, probably on the list already. So he will dive for balls, he will put on blocks, he'll put on shepherds, he'll do it all. And for a guy probably his size, it's amazing the courage that he has. So I think, the Eagles supporters will fall in love with him from that aspect of things. Absolute toughest nails. From a super coach perspective, I'd kind of want to have to see it if he was locked down in that halfback role. But I feel like a bit like Richmond, he will be moved all over the place. That's how we played it. I don't think anything changes with Mini there. A bit like what we talk about with, say, Cal Mills, Jordan Dawson, these sort of captains who, if an injury happens on game day or somebody's getting out of control, we need somebody to go lock down and we need somebody to go play a different role. That's Liam Baker in a nutshell. So for a lot of people asking me from a super coach perspective, I would hold fire on that one. Jack Graham, as you said, he's one that's a bit more intriguing. I wouldn't be starting with him, but they are one injury away from him being super relevant. Now, we already know Yo's out for who knows at the moment. We're waiting still for a timeline from the club about that. So that's where Duggan's coming in as the next choice. But if Tim Kelly went down or if, God forbid, Harley Reid missed some games, Jack Graham is that next in there, especially if it's more like, even if it was, say, Duggan, because he's an absolute bull. So he's not some guy who's going to rack up a huge meters gain, but if you want somebody to go in there, win a contest, lay defensive pressure on, that's going to be him. So I feel like he's still going to get some CBAs in there. He'll be part of that rotation, but a bit like, I feel like now Matt Kennedy going into Bulldogs, same sort of role, starting off half back, rotating into that midfield, runs two ways, and sort of supports those players around him, like your Harley Reids, who can just then go off and do their thing and not have to worry. A lot like how we did in our premiership years. Very much, it was we had an 18-man defence, but only 17 were buying into that. And the rule was Dusty could just go run around and do his thing, and the other guys would cover for him. And the two that were really covering for him were Baker and Graham. So I feel like that's Harley Reid. He'll able to go, and Mini will let him continue to develop, but he'll be the guy, see ball, get ball, do all the great stuff. But there's people that have got to pick up that defensive slack, and that's what Graham and Baker will do.
Yeah, agreed totally, mate. I even looking at the graphic there, like you mentioned Baker being Mr. Fix-It, like Baker could go straight in the guts and Duggan or Hunt could go back. Yeah, there's a lot of levers that Mini can pull. But yeah, it's like I said earlier, the pieces are there for Harley to be the number one man, and be the $1.5 million a year man, whatever it is. And I'll be shocked if he leaves, but it will be what it will be. But yeah, Baker and Graham. Yeah, it's look, I have more faith in Graham. It's for fantasy and Supercoach just because of where our list is at. And I know Graham, like, you got to remember, Optus Stadium's a bigger oval. He's a gut runner, so he's going to get on the end of a lot of +6s more than he's probably used to. And same with Bakes too. So that will play a little bit of a factor. Maybe that's my fantasy hat talking more. But yeah, as a supporter, I'm loving these role players and these two-way runners.
Yeah, for sure. And even if it doesn't happen for West Coast this year, where it's the wins improvement, as we said at the start of the show, you want, like Terry Walsh used to sum it up really good, you want to see the sort of the percentage improve. I think you guys were about 68% last year.
Yeah.
If that bumps somewhere between the 80s and the 90s, or even that 90 bit, but you still only win sort of 4 or 5, 6 games, it's still an improvement, because that means you're either winning by larger margins or you're stopping the blowouts. And then what you want is that real year of competitiveness. So no different to, say, Hawthorn a couple of years ago. They were getting in games, so that they had the odd blemish, but you're losing games between sort of 10 and 30 points, and the group develops because they're not far off, and you get that one more high draft pick to come in and complement the group. Probably could do with that extra key tall back, which I'm sure they're trying to source out and trying to attract somebody back there. And if there is probably one available in through trade or draft going forward, because obviously now losing Barras as well, trying to fill that gap going forward, I think there's a lot to work with, and you'd be pretty excited as a West Coast supporter going forward.
Yeah, agreed. In the short term, yeah, Brock and Van Ness are vying for that SSP spot. So, yeah, look, it's exciting. As a supporter and as a super coach and fantasy fan, it's West Coast is going to be really relevant.
100%. Jeppa, thank you for joining me, mate. I really appreciate your insights today. It's always great chatting footy with you, mate.
No, thanks for having me.
No problems. Thanks, community. Keep checking us out for other preseason videos. Oh, no, I actually didn't say this, and I do apologise. Jeppa, where can the good folk out there find you too, mate?
Oh, look, it's more on X. Jeppa DT is where you'll find me, I think, in the +6 podcast, which is fantasy classic relevance. I know a lot of your listeners definitely play both, but yeah, both on those platforms, and yeah, check us out there.
And you can find that information in the show notes. Thanks, Jeppa. Thanks, guys. We'll talk soon. Bye.